Welcome back, all my 40K fanatics out there. I am your current reigning, defending champion of Tim's Nation. And I am here today to bring you the list, the championship list that will be defending this title against Lane in the DeathWatch later today. That's right, the Canoptek Court are back. The Canoptek Court, which are currently the reigning champion, current victory army, currently 3-0 RTT winning Canoptek Court, going up against the now defunct DeathWatch. You know, it's really sad. DeathWatch have been on such a hot streak, taking down the Hypercrypt, smothering the Grey Knights. More on that later. And after all of those highs, this is going to be a torturous week for them. Because after the announcement of Imperial agents and the fact that DeathWatch will not be played anymore the way that we've currently seen them, this also means that they're going to have glory taken away from them one more time this week. When the Canoptek Court defeat them on this table and retain the Tim's Nation title. Everybody, let's take a look at what a champion looks like. All right, so I'm going to cut the theatrics for a bit and talk to you about this list because there has been some changes since the balanced data slates. One, the Canoptek Tomb Sentinels are legends. They are gone. Some things went up in points, which meant I had a smaller point gap to work with. And so I needed to adjust as well with Pariah Nexus. After what I did see at the RTT that I went to and went 3-0 with them, there was the role that the Canoptek Tomb Sentinels kind of played that I wanted to make sure I could fill with other units. So this is the first. We'll see how this plays out and if I want to keep this or change it. But this is the list. So first of all, Canoptek Court. What this does. The Canoptek Court has the Canoptek Control Matrix. What that is if my home deployment zone is always within the matrix. If I control at least half the objective markers in no man's land, that is a control matrix, the entire no man's land. If I control my opponent's objective, their home field, then their deployment zone is a control matrix. What this means is any unit wholly within a control matrix has full rerolls to hit. Huge. Any Canoptek or Cryptek units. Huge buff there. And if I'm not within a control matrix, we do still get reroll 1s for the entire army. So, I've done some work. I have the Doomstalkers painted. I finally bit the bullet with some advice that Lane and Zach had given me to really paint the rocks on the bases purple. They were like, dude, it's going to look great. You need to do this. Trust us. You'll love it. I was hesitant. I was scared. I finally pulled the trigger, and they were 100% right. I love the way the bases are looking now. I've been hard at work on them, getting them done. Doomstalkers are done. That's a big point. Lane can't give me any problems about that because I've been using these things for a long time, doing a lot of work with them, a lot of damage with them, and I have not had them tournament ready realistically for a very long time. Way longer than it should have been for these guys. We do have a couple things to work on. We did just pick up the last spider, so aesthetically I can have all of that mold, that model on the table. So cool. I did just pick it up yesterday, got it built, got it primed. Hopefully by game time I'll get a little more paint on it, but we're making we made a lot of progress with this army, especially considering a lot of other projects I've been working on. We'll talk about those later. All right, so here's the list. Let's start off with the least painted first, the Locust Heavy Destroyers. This is the recent addition. Currently, I'm still in consideration with these guys if I want to keep them, how I want to do their loadout and everything with them. What these guys do, they are a unit that has a Gauze Destructor. That is a big anti-tank gun. High strength, high AP, AP4, and flat 6 damage. They also have lethal hits, so cool, a 6 to hit will automatically wound. That's there. And they reroll 1s to wound versus monster or vehicle, the more important one. So these guys are a wild card. When they hit hard. And I don't have a lot of anti-vehicle. The Doomstalkers do well, but they're not perfect. These guys do very well. they hit hard, and they can change the momentum for other things in the army. You know, Doomstalkers being in position against 2 units. If I don't hit with the Gauze Destructor and can't do damage with 1 or 2 of them going in and can't get one to go through, I may not follow up with the Doomstalker and go somewhere else, because now I know I can't take out that larger target. So that's a lot of the momentum there. Also, these guys do well out of the secondary game. Whether they're solo models or a unit, if there's nothing for them to do and nothing for them to shoot at, they can go do secondaries being 50-point models. And that's kind of where I come into for the loadout. Not 100% sure I want to play it. There is the lowest form is take them as one big unit, take 3 of them as a single unit, so I can make the best out of reanimation protocols, but I feel like it's kind of a waste. There's no stratagems that really affect these guys entirely, so there's no real reason to take them as a unit except for that factor. And if I'm doing the reanimation factor on these guys, the consideration is taking a single and then taking 2 as a unit. This way the unit can be in a more difficult position. And if I lose one, I do have the ability to reanimate back into it. Then still having the single to go and complete actions and be that long-range shooter, etc., 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 that I named before. For this game, for this first test, I'm going to take them as 3 individual units. This means I have 3 individual models that can go and complete secondaries. I can still shoot other ones downwind to try and do damage and all that greatness. So now I won't be able to play off real well in reanimation protocols. I could just use it to heal if they take damage. But when you do 4 wounds and pick up a model, that's a unit. Next up, these spiders. As I said, I just got the one built yesterday, and they are next to go and get based, and they finish painting this guy, the one that's not painted, and get them over to the purple base scheme. I have been kind of holding off on these guys as much as I love them, because I really dread trying to get a paintbrush underneath them because of how I modeled them, how I put them on bases, because 3 of them actually have LEDs in them. All right, spiders. There are 6 of them, broken down into 3 units, so 2-man units. Each one has the particle beamer, caster, beamer, one of the 2. It is a D6 blast shot gun. They each have 2 of them. They're not twin-linked. Interesting if they were twin-linked. I'd still run them because of the second ability that they are devastating wounds. Strength 6, AP 0, 1 damage with dev wounds. D6 shots plus blast. Shooting into a 20-man unit, this means this will be 4d6 plus 16 shots into those units. These are very strong infantry clearers that also, just because they're 4d6 shots, can, oops, I wounded something, that like a vehicle, and they're strength 6. So some vehicles that are coming in at toughness 10 or actually toughness 11 or less, at least they're wounding them on 5. So it is not a horrible gun to try to plink off 1 or 2 wounds to finish off a vehicle that might be just trying to skate by. Really better against infantry, though. In combat, these guys hit hard. They're hit like trucks. 5 attacks apiece, Thunderhammer. Strength 8, AP 2, 2 damage. And then, again, the Canoptek control, being able to give these guys full rerolls on their gun, as well as in combat, means that these guys are a force to reckon with. Not to mention their vehicles, toughness 7, 6 wounds, and reanimation protocols and unit. So you finally get through and destroy one, and then you don't do any damage to the other one, because now you're done shooting and the spider's behind a wall or something. Then next turn, my phase, I reanimate a spider and put one back with D3 wounds. It's always fun doing that. 75 points of value. These guys also have their Gloom Prism as well as their own Autonomon Claw rule. What this means is that any vehicle units within 6 inches will have a 6-up Feel No Pain. On top of that, every unit in the army within 6 inches will have a 5-up Feel No Pain versus mortal wounds and psychic attacks, with devastating wounds now being mortal wounds that do not spill over. This is a lot more value behind spiders and what they could defend against. Strong piece. Love them in the court. Love them in general. Next up, let's talk about those Doomstalkers, the vehicle that will be getting a 6-up Feel No Pain with its toughness 8, 12 wounds, and a 4-up invul. That gives them a lot more durability. With that being said, the Doomstalkers also have their big gun on their head. The War of the Worlds type vehicle machine has strength 14, d6 plus 1 plus blast shots. The AP3 is something that just has to be watched and worked around because things like cover and armor of contempt stacked can really reduce this overall unit's damage, dropping out basically to an AP1 kind of effect. The flat 3 damage is really good into most targets, whether you have to put it onto a vehicle and just take the d6 plus 1 shots. Putting flat 3 damage through isn't too bad, and it can help to really push out finish off a larger unit if it gets hit by one of the Gauze Destructors first, taking 6 wounds down. This guy can finish the job. 2 wounds down on a 12 wound model, and now you've taken that out with a Doomstalker. Into infantry, it is amazing. It's at that perfect little sweet spot for some of the tougher units that have 3 wounds, like Terminators and things like that. That it's when it gets through, even though they have usually good saves and might be looking at a Terminator with a 4-up invuln, when it goes through, that's a guy. Such value there. And on top of it, the 5-up Overwatch out of Canoptek Court, being the fact that whenever these guys shoot, they are going to have full rerolls because they'll be in the backfield. They'll reroll hits into everything, including that Overwatch that they hit on 5s on. These guys are menaces, absolute menaces. I love them, and should have had them painted a lot sooner. Now going over into some of the meat and potatoes, we have 2 6-mans of the Scarabs. I've been loving these guys a lot lately. The way they work is really paint by numbers. And why I say that is because these guys move up and hide. Then they charge the unit that is charged by the wraiths. The wraiths have a Technomancer nearby, so these guys will obtain OC1. They're in engagement range, so they reduce OC by 1. That combined with the wraiths having an OC2 means I can take that objective to guarantee that full rerolls to hit for holding the no man's land objective markers. These guys can help push that limit. On top of it, they hit, they explode, doing D3 damage. Oh, actually potentially more, or flat damage. And they, it's D3 or flat 3. And then you do it again during your opponent's turn for another 3 mortal. They have 6 attacks apiece with lethal. So when you're re-rolling hits, that means you're making your opponent make a lot of saves. And these guys can accidentally do some damage. Then, after you only lose 2 of them, the spiders decide, hey, our rule lets us put a model back per spider nearby, so we're just going to put 2 back in there. I did have a game recently where I had 1 Scarab base left. I rolled my reanimation protocol and brought a Scarab base back. Then I had 2 squads of spiders nearby that were then able to reanimate 2 Scarabs apiece and put the squad back at full health right there. Obviously, the 1 Scarab still had damage on it from the reanimations, but we had 6 Scarab bases back in the unit after being at 1. A lot of fun there. Love it. So that's a lot of the value out of the Scarabs. Also, because of a backfield Cryptex that I have in this army, which we'll talk about in a minute, they're able to keep that OC1 for most of the game and able to complete other secondaries when they might need that time to heal or there's not really a job for them to do or something for them to hit. You know, like them usually find something to hit. They hit vehicles too pretty hard because of lethal hits and rerolls again. Next up, the Canoptek Wraiths. So these Wraiths are going to be led by a Technomancer. So they will have a 5-0 Feel No Pain. Other than that, they do have the Vicious Claws. So they're looking at that Strength 6, flat 2 damage, which, I mean, it's decent. It's a decent hit. They do have the full rerolls to hit, but they're not as nasty in combat as one would think. They do have the Particle Caster, which is a pistol, which is also nice because then when they're in engagement, they can still shoot it. And it is a Strength 5 weapon with Feel No Pain. This unit really needs the rerolls. If they're at reroll 1s, they it hurts them a lot because of their weapon skills and ballistic skills being 4. So they really, really, really need the rerolls to be effective. But it's not fair that I complain about it, because this unit is actually probably one of the most durable units in the game. This is a 6-man unit that has 4 wounds apiece, 3 up, toughness 6, 3 up, 4 up, with a 5 up, feel no pain. 4 wounds. Think about a 2 damage weapons going through, and you go, that's a wraith. Then the opponent rolls the feel no pain, and even just stops one of them. That wraith's alive with a wound. Now, the next shot that goes in, whatever damage it may be, has to go onto him, and he soaks up that damage. These guys accidentally end up soaking up so many damage because of that feel no pain and making that happen, that they're just so durable. On top of that, they do have reanimation protocols and the Technomancer that can then heal for D3 wounds. So they are even able to start growing models back if left uncontested and left alone. These guys are super fast, and they are my objective getting units, especially early in the game. One thing I love to do is move them forward, barely touch an objective, making my opponent have to commit. And when they do, I can spend a command point and then move the unit back 6 inches to get it away, or push it way up forward to either keep the objective because my opponent can't get enough units on it, or zone out and force my opponent to have to dedicate, blocking line of sight to other units that can then counterpunch in the next turn, such as the Doomstalkers, the Spiders, and even the Scarabs. Because the wraiths are still, again, very tough to take down, and usually I'll be left with, as a 6-man squad, I'll usually still be left with at least 1 or 2 wraiths and the Technomancer to be able to give the Cryptek boost over to the Scarabs. Now, those Technomancers, let's talk about them. So we have 2 Technomancers, because of the 2 wraiths. The one that is my more Canoptek Technomancer, is the one that is going to be my Warlord, and he will have the Infiltrate enhancement. So that unit will be able to infiltrate. Wraiths are able to move relatively quick, but I still like having the ability to set a unit up in a better position to tag an objective behind a piece of terrain. You can usually find 1 piece of terrain in your deployment zone that you can play off of to move to another objective to stage that. Getting that second unit is the tough part, and having Infiltrate allows me to pick a piece of terrain that may not be in my deployment zone, but gives me that advantage early on, and that's what I like to use it for. Technomancers can heal for D3, not reanimation, just heal D3. They give the 5 up, feel no pain, again, as their aura. And, well, they're Technomancers. They are Crypteks, so they're going to help the Scarabs to have that OC1. Next up for characters, we'll talk about these guys, the Psychomancers. I love these dudes. Lane hates these dudes. These guys have an 18-inch range ability that does not require line of sight. So you put them behind a wall, and you target a unit within 18 inches, and that unit has to take a battle shock test at -1. If the unit's within 6 inches, they have another ability that gives them additional -1 to leadership and battle shock, so they're taking battle shock at -2. What this does is it hits a unit, and when you make them battle shock, suddenly they can't be targeted by Armor of Contempt or any other defensive stratagems that your opponent might want to use in this scenario. Also, it makes them OC 0, which makes it real easy to tag that objective, steal it with hardly anything, and now you have Canoptek control range, which really helps out in other areas. Being that these guys are in the backfield, they're also a unit that can continuously give my Scarabs the OC1 factor by being able to keep with them and just float up afterwards when the wraiths need to go do other things. All right, so that is the list that we'll be bringing. Again, biggest change is the Locust Heavy Destroyers. That's going to be the big trial and error point, see how those go. I am considering Ophidians, considering stuff like that, like Ophidians that can go up and down to be able to constantly have that secondary threat. But initially, I want to try and see if I can also fill that void with something that does well with vehicles, which is one thing I kind of lack in. So I feel like the Locust Heavies in this scenario might be the better pick. We'll see. Well, that is it. That, my friends, is what a champion looks like. soon to be fully painted and cleaned up. So yes, they still have some works, but hey, even a champion needs to shave once in a while. I feel bad for the DeathWatch to do this to them on channel, on stream. They've had such a good week, or such a good last 2 weeks. Again, the Grey Knights, they smothered them, and they took out the Hypercrypt the week before. Had a nice run at this GT recently, which Lane will talk about. And here's where the road ends. We now know what the Codex looks like. And I hate to be the one to deliver on the bad news, but this, standing next to me, is the closest they're going to get to the title. All right, everyone. Thanks for watching. We'll talk to you again soon.